Section 4.4, we're looking at limits on population, okay, and communities in ecosystems. So what stops populations from getting too big or too, like, what keeps them, okay, and then and same with communities. So we have what we call biotic potential. Biotic potential, again, biotic meaning living things, potential, how big it kind of can get. So the maximum number of offspring that species could produce if resources are unlimited is what we call our biotic potential. Okay, so that's based upon a couple different things. So birth potential. So how many offspring can you have per birth? Okay, so in humans, birth potentials, most people have one. Sometimes you have twins. Okay, but those are less common, and even less common would be 3, 4, or even 5, I guess. Okay, the capacity for survival, so the number of offspring that reach a reproductive age. Okay. So again, for human, most of the time, most will reach reproductive age. Okay, so we have a really high capacity for survival because of our medicines, things like that. Okay, where if you look at different animals, okay, they have a really low capacity. If they have, maybe he'll have 3 babies, only 1 might make it to reproductive age. Okay, breeding frequency, how many times a year, okay, that species can reproduce. And so again, humans, just going back to us, okay, we can have a baby every 9 months. Not that anybody would do that, but animals, some can maybe have 2 litters a year, okay, or elephants, I think, have a really long one, so it's every couple of years that you can have that you can reproduce. Okay, and then the length of reproductive life, so the age of a sexual maturity and a number of years of reproduction. So how long can those that are having babies actually continue to produce or reproduce? So factors that cause populations to increase. So favorable light. Okay, again, if you have more favorable light, you're going to have more producers, which then allow more consumers. Favorable temperature, again, another factor that will help producers. Favorable chemical environment, so what's the soil look like, things like that. Sufficient food. Okay, now we're looking at again, if all of these are favorable, they'll make more producers, which then the consumers can eat. Low number or low effectiveness of predators. Whoops. Okay, and so if you have a lot of predators and they can kill every time they go after something, okay, it's going to reduce the numbers in those other populations, which then eventually would reduce the number of predators. Okay, so you can't have a lot of predators in one area. And that's why a lot of, when you kind of look at the predators, there's usually a kind of a top predator and then some scavengers and stuff, but there's not a lot of that around, of those same predators. Okay, other things that can cause populations to increase is few diseases and parasites. Okay, again, if diseases are around, okay, it can take out a part of that population, which is the reason we're all staying home right now. Okay, and then the ability to compete for resources. Okay, and so again, when we talked about niche, everything hopefully is eating different things and can get the food and stuff it needs. So the factors that cause population to increase is if it's able to compete for those resources it needs. Factors that cause the population to decrease. So this is kind of the opposite. Really, it's too much of anything. So too much light, too little light, okay, too cold, too warm, okay, unfavorable chemical environment, insufficient food, okay, high number highly effective predators, okay, if there's diseases or parasites, and inability to compete for resources. So, which makes sense. If you have any of this, it's going to cause a population to decrease. The stability, so populations often fluctuate in number due to abiotic and biotic factors. Stability is reached when the population exceeds its carrying capacity. So the carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals of a species that can be supported at any time by an ecosystem. So populations can exceed the carrying capacity for a short time, but then generally will crash when food or other resources run out. If you have too high of a population of, let's say, deer, they're all eating the grass and trees and stuff, eventually they're going to eat it down so much so that there's not enough for all of them there. And so, or usually what happens is, like, once you reach this carrying capacity, there's going to be one of those factors that we just talked about. So one of these is going to come in, whether it's a disease, okay, whether it's more predators will come in, okay, or just like the weak ones of that same population won't be able to compete with the stronger ones and they'll start to die off. Okay, so limits of tolerance. Every organism has adapted to survive its environment. As stated by Shepard's law of tolerance, organisms can withstand a reasonable range of abiotic characteristics. So once the abiotic characteristics are unmanageable, the organism cannot survive anymore. So thus then the population will decrease. Okay, and so like the populations will vary. Okay, once it reaches that carrying capacity, there's going to be something that comes in that will cause the population to decrease. The law of minimum is the nutrient in the lowest supply limits the population growth. And so if they run out of any of those nutrients, that's gonna like their food, water. If they can't all find the shelter and protect themselves from predators, things like that, okay, whatever that is kind of cause the population to be limited. Okay, so just kind of looking at this population, okay, of fish species within the water. Okay, and so for temperatures, okay, if the temperature is too low, okay, you'd think most water will freeze at a low temperature, so there's not going to be any fish. Okay, in this, as the temperature gets a little bit higher, okay, it's going to have a low population. Only like the strongest will survive. Okay, it's a zone of physiological stress. Okay, in this optimal range of temperature, you'll have lots. Okay, if it starts to get too high, okay, then again they'll start to be stressed out. And then if the water temperature increases anymore, you have your upper level of tolerance where nothing could survive. Okay, and that's why we're worried about things like global warming and stuff. If it increased the ocean temperatures, okay, it removes some of the lots of the oxygen. Okay, and then all of a sudden we get into this area up here. Oops. Okay, so causes of change in populations. So we have density independent factors. So independent means that like these don't matter on how big the population is. Okay, so the effect on the population, they'll affect it no matter what the population is. If they have a really small population, really big. Okay, so these are major things like flood, fire, pesticides, climate change, habitat destruction, drought. These, back. Okay, these won't matter. Like if there's a fire, it doesn't matter if there's 2 deer or 50 deer. Okay, it's going to affect that population. Okay, the density dependent factors. Now these are the factors that will affect a population if it gets too big. So some major things would be like food shortages. If you have too many organisms fighting for the same food, there's not going to be enough. Competition for mates and breeding areas. Okay, diseases that spread. The higher the population, the more the disease spreads. Introduction of an exotic species. Okay, increased predation and competition for resources. So all of those, okay, these are going to happen if a population gets too big. Okay, and so like if you got a large population of something, the predators are going to come because they can find lots of these. All right, so that's end of section 4.4. Okay, again, you don't have to worry about like doing these tasks. Okay, the big thing is just getting your assignments done.